So before I get into that, to that last question about voice, I think one thing to think about with these voice assistants is why they're being created. Like if you think about Amazon Alexa, you think about Google Home, it's all about building an ecosystem. And so what they want to do is create a good user experience. So, maybe someday down the line they find a way to monetize it, but for them, Amazon monetizing Alexa is getting you to go to Alexa and be like, Alexa, I need toothpaste, and you're buying from Amazon. Google's the same thing. So I think when you're thinking about voice and how ads fit into it, think about it's less about right now monetizing that channel and more pulling you into the overall ecosystem and creating that flywheel effect. So that, I think, is the one difference in where we are with like mobile or desktop search and voice. So now jumping into my presentation, thank you to the Alsma group for inviting us to speak. I'm going to walk you through a little bit about how we think about the changes happening in search. I realized before watching the last two presentations, I actually don't have an About Yext slide in here, but everything that we are talking about here is what we build our product and what we build it to help both our partners and clients. So please come and approach myself or Rachel afterwards. So for those of you who don't know, my name's Tyler Donahue. I think I've met a lot of you before, whether it was in my previous role of running all of our product partnerships at Yext. I built our network with Google and Apple and Facebook. Or I just met you last night. So about 2 years ago, I was actually asked by our CEO, Howard, to move to Japan and help open the office there. I don't speak Japanese. I had never been to Japan, and so like anyone, I turned to Google to figure out, can I survive in Japan if I don't speak Japanese? Turns out the answer here is yes. I then said, that's great. Maybe I want to climb Mount Fuji while I'm there. How tall is it? There we go, how tall it is, and a brief call out why I might not actually enjoy climbing Mount Fuji. But speaking of height, how tall is the average door in Japan? Turns out I'm about 13 centimeters too tall for the average door in Japan. So where can I buy a good helmet in Tokyo? Beyond just my lack of knowledge of Japan before I went there, the biggest thing I noticed here is every single one of those queries had an answer. We no longer are getting 10 blue links. We're getting a direct answer. And this shouldn't surprise anyone in this room because this has been happening for the last 20 years. Ooh, that formatting is a little off. It's supposed to be links to answers, not links to answerers. But as you can see, this has been an evolution rather than a revolution. And we're seeing this continue to go up. Already, almost 80% of voice assistant responses come in the form of answers. And this is happening in search, it's happening on chatbots, all of this is happening. What really makes this interesting, though, is because we now get answers, consumers are rethinking and being retrained how to search. We're not using short keywords. We're actually asking longer, more complex questions. Over 70% of all queries are 3 words or more. So think of the last time you went and were searching for something online. Maybe you started on Google, then maybe you asked Siri or Alexa, you went to the company's website, but throughout every single step, you're asking questions, getting an answer, asking a more specific question, getting another answer, all the way down until you get to what you actually want to do. That's the consumer journey now. The way we all are trained to think is we ask Google or Alexa or any of these services for what we want and we get it. And if you want another example or another justification of this, look at the first query I ran. Did you guys notice right here? Google is actually putting into its results, people also ask. They know that you're going to go in there, ask a question, get an answer, and ask another question. In fact, when you click and open up one of those answers, they give you another 3 questions. Google is already understanding that is how we work and that's how we want to search. And this is really exciting because, let me take a step. I'm getting ahead of myself there. The other thing to think about here, and I'm going to ask you guys to kind of take off your marketing hat and put on your consumer hat. Why is this possible? Well, it's really possible because of the rise of natural language processing. It's actually getting easier for us to talk to computers. We don't have to type. We don't have to, plug in into different jacks. We don't have to do any of that. We can actually speak like I'm speaking to you right now. And this is fundamentally changing how we interact with computers. I think the areas that will actually see the biggest adoption of this are some of the Asian markets that use a character-based language. It's a real pain to type in a character-based language, but now if you can just speak to Siri, it's that much easier. So why is this exciting? If your search is a question, you're indicating your intent. What's intent? It's I want to know, I want to go, I want to do, I want to buy. It's what you want at that moment. And every single one of these searches over there show you what that consumer who's doing the search actually wants. This is something that actually is incredibly relevant in our industry, and that's the local industry. Mobile searches are growing faster. I think we just had some, Bernard gave some great stats about this, and an incredibly high amount are doing that search and then clicking get directions actually going to the store. They are telling us what they want here. And this is fundamental. And this should make sense to you guys. Every single one of us in this room is a consumer. The last time a brand met you at that moment of intent, you had a better consumer experience, you found them much easier, you didn't have to call their support line, and you actually probably converted at a higher rate. This should be very intuitive. And so the biggest thing that I want to stress here is the customer journey fundamentally starts with a question. And if you or your customers do not answer it, someone else will. And that's really what we're talking about here. Consumers expect to get what they ask for. And if you or your end client are not preparing yourself to give them what they want, someone else will. Well, okay, so if all you have to do in this world is answer a question to be successful, it should be easy, right? Not quite. Let's take a look at this, this question. Best menswear store in London, open now, that sells dress shirts. This is a query you might be asked on Google, on your own website, a number of different places. Let's break it down, though. In this one query, we have best, implying some sort of rating, probably 4 stars or higher. Menswear store, that's the primary category, that's what you want. Okay, so going back to this, normal data structures can't handle this question. So what if Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, all these sites done? They've moved to what's called a knowledge graph. Now, you shouldn't feel bad if you don't know what a knowledge graph is. I think this is the biggest question I get on a daily basis when I talk about this. But here's the easiest way to think about it. A normal database, let's say you want to store all of your locations and all of your product information. You'd set up a table, and on that first table you'd have all of your locations, and you'd have the name of the location, the address, maybe phone number, hours of operation, et cetera, et cetera. And then you'd have a separate table with all the products. The name of the product, the SKU, the description, the price. You'd have those 2 separate tables, but there wouldn't really be any connection between the two unless you built a third table that was the interaction between products and locations. This is where a knowledge graph is different. A knowledge graph would have all of that same information, but also store the relationships so that you can go back and look at this query and know the table that has all the information about products. You also know where those products are located in which locations. So the big point here is you need to start, Google has started doing this, Apple started doing this, Facebook, all of these sites who want to answer questions are building a knowledge graph. And businesses really have to also. And this is the fundamental, if you're gonna take one thing away from my talk, it is that you really need to start structuring your data to prepare yourself to answer questions. Here's an example of a healthcare company, a hospital. When you start to look at what things they might need to answer about, you obviously have doctor, but then you want to see, okay, how good's the doctor? Where did he study? Studied at, had residency at university. What procedures can he perform? Do they fix which ailment? What is a symptom, a sign of that? All of these are questions that patients are asking. They want to know before they go in. Who should they meet with because my ankle is swollen, or I think I broke my arm, or do I have appendicitis? This is the type of data structure you have to set up in order to answer these questions. And it really is fundamental that you have this set up because the world's getting a lot more complicated. Way back in 1440, it was really easy. You want to put out marketing stuff, you just use the printing press. That was it. Got a little more complicated in the early 90s when you had a website, got e-commerce, email, but since then, it has just exploded. And the number of places that a business's brand interacts with consumers is growing and will continue to grow. And I think the scariest thing is when you think about all of the new technology that comes out that you wouldn't even think was meant to interact with your brand, like Snapchat, is now a fundamental part about how an entire generation interacts with your brand. And it actually gets more complicated than that, because even if you think you're only marketing to one country, you're global. This is the Holiday Inn in San Jose on CK Map, which is an app that Chinese tourists use. Everyone in this room is either working with or working for a company in a country that Chinese tourists frequent. And you think about Japan, there's 126 million people in Japan. There will be over 15 million tourists in Japan from China this year. It's a massive, massive part of the market share, and you need to be thinking about how you appear when Chinese tourists are asking questions on these apps. So let's talk about how you can, once you've built that knowledge graph, how can you actually project your brand's facts and answers into these third-party knowledge graphs? I think we're all very familiar with direct API integrations. Obviously, if Google updates the GMB API, you should work on it. As Apple Maps connect, once you can get into that, get into that. That's a no-brainer. You have to do that. I think we're familiar with reviews, or in this case, Review S. We're all familiar with reviews. You want to be managing reviews, paying attention to it, so that when people are searching for best insert subject, you're appearing for it. But I think there's one thing I want to call out here is what we call intent pages. And they're pages on your website that answer a specific question. And so an example of this could be if you're a restaurant, having a page for your menu. For when people are searching for menu for Sala di Gustiano, which is an Italian restaurant around the corner from my apartment. If you are a car dealership, it could be a page focused on your car inventory. If you are a financial institution, maybe you hold events to get people in the room, it's a page for that event. The key point here is by building these pages, by making sure they're marked up correctly, Google can start to extract that information, and these other services can start to extract that information and show it on their search. And it's even more important that you do this because one of the biggest things that we've seen is there's been a fundamental change in how people interact with your website. So this is how it used to work. You'd go to www.yext.com or wherever you want to think about, and you'd select a category, navigate down to a specific item. Let's say you're looking to apply for a job. You go careers, job, apply for a job. Now, people are starting on Google, they're starting on Siri, they're starting on Alexa, and they're asking a specific question. And again, think about this from the perspective of being a consumer. If you've just gone to Google and asked about jobs available at Yext, you don't want to get dropped on Yext.com. You want to get dropped on the page for that job. And so what people are doing now, what consumers are doing, is they're starting on these third-party sites, and they're getting dropped on the specific page that answers their question. They might jump around between different pages, jobs at that specific location. If you're looking at what products are available at that location, they might jump around there, but they're almost certainly not coming to your homepage. And so one of the things that we talk to our clients about a lot is that your website is upside down. You should, the homepage is a beautiful space. It's a canvas that you can make look beautiful, but these are what matter. This is where you get the answers directly to your client. The end consumer, if they can't get the answer on your website, they're going to go right back to Google. And so you need to make sure it's easily there and available to them. And so this is an example I want to share with you. This is a Japanese, it's a location in Tokyo for Jaguar Land Rover. One of the things that we talked with Jaguar Land Rover and they realized is that every single one of their locations, and though Jaguar Land Rover is a global brand, fundamentally the location at a local level, I don't go buy a car from China, I buy it from the car shop near me, car dealership. Sorry, car shop's not a thing. They realized these dealers were actually creating mini versions of their global site because in their mind, they're like, that's what we should do. That's what people care about. But when would you ever go to a dealer's website and just look around? You're going there because you have a specific purpose. So they reworked this site. This is their page for those of you who don't speak Japanese. This is their page for their dealership. They reworked their site to be specifically about what people needed. And so here it's specifically for their dealers, and the call to actions are basically access the map, so please give me directions, schedule a test drive, and email the dealership. And then as you scroll down, they're giving you all the local inventory. It's everything that you need if you're looking for a dealership and you're ready to come in and do this. It's not only giving the answer, but it's allowing them to convert much faster. But the other thing that's interesting is every single one of these small businesses, there might be more than one reason that they're going to the site. So here's a second page on their website that's specifically for repairs. And if you look it up, if you look into the Google Webmaster Tools, their schema marked up differently, all of this stuff to both A, send a message to Google that if you are looking for repairs, you come here, and B, to provide the call to actions immediately to directions to location and schedule an appointment. And so that's really, what I wanted to share with you. Before we pause for questions, I really, again, I want to stress that as you're looking at how to prepare for this world as search is changing, the first step you guys should be thinking about is how to structure your data and how to collect that data. Building the Yext, before I moved to Japan, I was part of the team that was building out Yext network. Still, it's one of the largest, it's the largest network there is, but that to be honest, isn't that isn't as impressive anymore. Google has rolled out open APIs. Apple is rolling out more and more ways to get them data. Facebook has open APIs. The fundamental thing that you guys should be thinking about is building that knowledge graph, building the data set, because that will get you ready for the future, get you ready for whatever is coming next. And so with that, we'll turn it over for questions.
Great, we got time for questions. Anyone have a question? You.
You said there is this. All right, thanks, Tyler. You said that 70% of searches have 3 words or more.
Correct.
Is that true for maps? For Google, because I've moved almost all my searching to Google Maps. Near me. But are there those long strings in the maps as well?
Yeah, I mean,
that's a data point for search overall.
Yeah,
whether it's in Google's regular search or on their maps.
Yeah, and so fundamentally, any near me search, if you type near me plus one more word, that's 3 words. But I think the bigger thing to take from this though is
if you're in maps, you're likely to be wanting it near me. So near me, you kind of throw that out as to the words.
Yes, I think yes. So okay, so there's I want 2 parts of this.
Okay.
One part is when you start to think about we're looking at search in general, and the trend that we're seeing again is that it is becoming much more
longer.
But I don't think the length is what we should be focusing on. The length is just the way that it's the intent. And to your point, if you're writing burger into maps, the implication is it's near me.
Right.
And that's really the bigger point, is that the intent is there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the intent, the growth of the queries, that is more of a search trend, but I don't think it diminishes the fact that
it's intent-driven stuff, whether it's one word for burgers and it finishes with near me, or
that's the point. And,
best. I mean, and you don't want the worst burger, so you don't need best burgers near me.
Course.
You probably want that's implied intent.
Yes.
So there's probably an explicit intent and an implied intent.
Yeah, and I think another part of this, just to make clear, is we're saying keywords to questions, but I don't think people are necessarily writing grammatically correct questions. It's really,
we know they're not, because most people can't write anymore. So
or they're not typing grammatically correct questions.
Correct.
Yes.
They can't do it either way,
Yeah.
whether they were right.
Well, is there a difference in whether that's an explicit or an implied intent in terms of the results, or are they pretty much reading that?
I think we'd have to ask that question to Google or our friends from Alibaba.
A lot of questions I'll ask you.
Yeah.
I probably should ask Google.
Yeah,
But.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think for the people in this room it should matter, because I think at the end of the day, if you know, whether it's implicit or explicit, if you know what the consumer wants, you should be giving it to them. You should be giving them the ability, or giving them the answer they're looking for, because that's what's going to lead to the highest conversion rate, that's going to lead to the most discoverability and all of that.
Okay. You got a question back here? Hold on a sec. Go ahead. Pass it over to, if you don't mind.
Tyler, I want to ask you a question. So if you're working mainly with small businesses, then probably your main job right now would be to help them develop the right questions about their business, so be able to fulfill that for the end user. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think you can start very simply. And I don't think, one of the nice things about a knowledge graph actually is that it's much more flexible than a database, and so you can continuously add to it. And I think, if it's a restaurant, they're going to need the location, they're going to need the menu. And then over time, you'll start to think about, okay, are they hosting events there? Are there, is there a specific menu item they want to call out or special offer? It's not something you need to do all at once. And I think it's something that you can continue to evolve as you get more complex and more advanced with their marketing.
Do you have a set series of questions that you have somewhere that we could look at as a basis to help these small businesses?
That's a good question. I don't have one off the top of my head. Connect with Rachel Martin. Okay. Yeah, so to Rachel's point, we are building out a set of templates that will allow you to fill specific information in. For instance, it could be about a location, an event, a product, a menu, all of that we're starting to fill out. But we also give you the ability to use custom entities to actually build whatever you want post that point.
Thank you.
There's a question in the back. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it. I think voice is going to be the next big thing, and I think we all have to get off the mobile when we're driving, and we're all going to have to start talking to it. I do also think that we're speaking about markets, and the younger people are certainly voice enabled more than we are. But what's the Yext Answers new product, or Answer? You have a new product coming out.
And so I will touch on that. But one thing about voice to also think about, when you think about markets, there's language markets, because I was meeting with a large agency in Japan, and he was asking if I thought that voice was going to be a thing. And to your point, I think because it's easier for us to speak, it will. It's just going to take time as more and more people use it, and the NLP technology gets better in different markets. Regarding age, the person I know who actually uses voice technology the most is my mother, who's 60 years old. And that's because it's too hard for her eyes to see the letters. And so she just speaks, and some great typos, but I actually think that it's just easier, and regardless of the age, you're gonna see people use it. So the Yext Answers product that we announced last week at our conference Onward, here's what we're seeing in the market. Like we just talked about, Google, Siri, Alexa, they've really set the standard as to what search should be. We as consumers know that if we ask one of those services a question, we get what we want. And it's what we expect now from any search experience. But site search on a brand's website, it just doesn't live up. You still get 10 blue links. It's keyword-based search. It's just a really nasty experience. And so what Yext Answers is meant to do is actually provide that Google-like search experience on a brand's website. The idea is that you can provide the answer on their website when people are looking for you, so that consumers don't leave your homepage and go to Google. And in that situation, Google becomes your homepage. It can serve up information about your competitors. It can serve up information that's wrong. We want to put the business in control of the answer that is being given for any consumer's question.
But you are right about that Google's just giving us one-line answers, and then they give those 10 questions, or did you think about these questions? How do we control those questions? I mean, is the next thing, because it's pushed everybody
Yeah.
down off the page. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, we will never. There's no brand large enough, and our friends from Apple who are here will agree with us. It's like there's no brand large enough to push around Apple or Google or Alexa to make them change exactly what they put up there. So the best thing that we need to do is really make sure that they have the correct data. And so when you think about those types of questions, a site like Google tends to be taking snippets from other websites. There's a really interesting stat we saw that when Google launched featured snippets, Wikipedia's direct traffic dropped by about 21%. Because basically they were taking from Wikipedia and putting it right up there. And it's not that Wikipedia information wasn't being used, they just weren't going direct to Wikipedia. And so that's when we start talking about things like intent pages. There's certain things like FAQs and things like that I think both for voice search and for like the people also ask questions on Google, you need to be putting that out there and making it very clear and marked up correctly so that they're able to take that in and if they deem it the correct response to display it on their search.
Got one more question over here. Stan?
Yeah, hi. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Any plans for Yext in Southeast Asia region? And do you have any insights on how search behavior is in this part of the region itself? Because I think it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
We don't really have voice much, and looking at Google Search Console, because we have websites and we do SEO, a lot of the searches are also very non-question based. Although I do see quite a bit of Google giving us answers, so that can also affect search behavior. And I think that's how we get to evolve and start asking questions when we see the Google search results evolve as well, right? And that's an observation, I'm sure, is that the reason why Google is doing this is because they want to kind of reduce the number of click-throughs to get to your answers, and hence the snippets make the searcher lazy. You kind of almost get the answer on the SERPs without having to go to the website, which is not necessarily a good thing as well, isn't it? But then again, not doing that means that your competitor is providing the answer. So.
Yeah, so to the first part of your question, I can't really comment on our future plans, but the public company stuff and the SEC and all that. But what I will say is we believe that the problem we're solving is a global problem. We don't believe that it's only focused on the markets we're in. As far as your comment about the second question, I think it goes into how every market's at its own point along the digital maturity path. And I think the thing I keep coming back to in this, and the thing that as I think through this idea of links to answers, keywords to questions, I think it comes back to what is easiest for me as a consumer. And I think getting that answer and kind of learning that I can ask specifically for what I want is a fundamental truth across every human, that you just want it to be easier. And so I think that, in different markets, you look at a country like China where Google and Facebook are blocked, they are developing their own technology, but it's all about what makes it easier for the end consumer. And so I think, every market's on at a different point in the digital maturity. However, I think the path everyone's taking is whether you're using Google, or whether you're in South Korea using Naver, no matter where you are, you're looking for the easiest way to get what you want. And that's kind of where, when I go back to kind of structuring the data and why it's important, is if you have the data structured correctly, you're much better prepared for the future. Instead of kind of running around and be like, oh, there's this new thing, I have to go and run around and grab all this data and send it to them. It's really just preparing you for the future and kind of as your consumers evolve.
Okay, so I think you gave a very important point about you mentioned customer journey a few times.
Yeah.
And I just want to highlight that. So you can have questions, different kind of questions at different points of the customer journey.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But I think coming from the light bright spark moment is that one of the advantages of having questions early up at the awareness funnel allows you to, at the very least, cookie them so you can retarget them using Facebook ads, display ads, and start to build relationships right early on in the customer journey itself. So brilliant. Having FAQs, questions, and hooking them right at the early stage of the customer journey itself.
Yeah, and I think
I'm going to execute this.
As they get further along, I think the big thing to think about is the customer journey starts with a very broad question. Like
That's
I
right,
think
of course.
the slide we had was like women's flats in Atlanta.
Yep.
And then as you get further along, they're more and more specific.
More specific commercial
And-
intent comes in, right?
And then you get to the end, and you want to make sure that when they get to the end, they can convert.
Right.
And so it's all, to your point, it's like, it is a journey, and making sure you have the questions throughout, the answers to the questions throughout that journey is very important.
Fantastic. You're a geek. Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So where are brands in terms of their preparation for this? I mean, are they behind, or are they aware that this is the change they have to be making?
I mean, I think it depends on the brand.
Well,
yeah,
as
of
a
course.
general comment.
Yeah, but I think it depends on the brand, but I think also the rate of change that you've seen in technology has just picked up so much that on average, brands tend to be a little bit behind just because if you think about it, 10 years ago, 13 years ago, the iPhone didn't exist.
Right.
And so you think just in the last 13 years how much has changed in how we interact with technology, interact with brands, that most of these companies, whether you're an SMB and you don't have time, because if you're a plumber, you plumb, and I don't think that's a verb, but you get what I'm saying.
yeah.
If you're a restaurant, you run you cook, you
You rest.
yeah, you rest. You rest. If you run the restaurant, you rest. But whether you're that or you're a big brand like McDonald's that can't quite move as fast, you're not ready for this. And we talk to people, and for a small business, they sometimes don't even have the data. They know it off the top of their head. It's not stored anywhere. It's just not something people have needed to think about. And now we're in a world where everything's done online through all these different channels. People are tagging your location on Snapchat and TikTok, which I don't even know what that is. And I think I'm one of the youngest people in the room. But it's like there's constantly...
Who's on TikTok? Quick show of hands. Okay.
Yeah, it's constantly evolving, and I think for that sole reason, people tend to be behind.
Okay. Last chance for one more question.
Do I know Chinese? No, I have not. So, 日本語勉強しています。ちょっと日本語わかります。
Yep. Awesome. Last thing.
Yeah.
New technologies on the horizon, like 5G, et cetera. How does that impact this, if at all? I mean, does this accelerate the urgency of this in any way? Or?
Yeah, I mean, 5G is kind of in its own. Like, there's new technology like AR, VR, but
maybe
then
that's more relevant.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a new way that structured data is going to be needed to craft an experience with your brand, and I think not only that, but let's not take for granted that the speed at which globalization is becoming a thing. I mean, I grew up in a small town outside of Hartford, Connecticut, and I'm speaking to people right now from all over Asia, and that's in and of itself should be mind-blowing, but it should be an indication that, I came here, I downloaded Grab because I needed to use Grab here, and I think that experience is only going to accelerate the advancement of new technologies that you interact with brands.
All right, great. Tyler, thank you very much. That was great. Please join me in thanking Tyler.